Chapter 1. The day he said it out loud, I still remember the exact moment my boss said it. Not because it was loud. Not because it was dramatic. But because it was calm. Too calm. We were sitting in the conference room on the 12th floor, the one with the glass walls and the long oak table that always smelled faintly of burnt coffee. Monday morning. Same routine. Same fake smiles. Same power dynamics. There were 12 of us in that room. Sales, marketing, finance, legal. Everyone who mattered. Everyone who could see me. My boss, Richard, stood at the head of the table with his tablet in hand, tapping the screen like he always did when he wanted to look busy. Mid-50s, perfect haircut, expensive watch. He made sure everyone noticed. He loved control, loved reminding people who had it and who didn't. The meeting was about a deal. A big one. A regional expansion contract with a logistics company that had been circling us for months. Millions on the table. Promotions riding on it. Bonuses. Futures. I knew that deal better than anyone. Because I had built it, that I'd done the market analysis, that I'd identified the client, I drafted the initial proposal at my kitchen table at midnight while my coffee went cold. But when Richard talked about it, he never said my name. He said, the team. When he finished his presentation, he sighed and looked around the room like a disappointed teacher. This deal, he said, is stalling. No one spoke. Then his eyes landed on me. Not angry. Not frustrated. Almost bored. Mark, he said, leaning back in his chair. What exactly do you do here? A few people shifted in their seats. I felt my jaw tighten. I manage client strategy, I said carefully. I've been coordinating. Richard cut me off with a small laugh. No, he said. I mean, what value do you actually bring? The room went quiet. Not awkward quiet. Dangerous quiet. I could feel eyes on me. Some curious. Some uncomfortable. Some relieved it wasn't them. Richard tilted his head. You're useless, he said. Just like that. Not shouting. Not angry. You're useless, he repeated. This deal is proof of that. My ears burned. I felt something hot rush up my neck, but I kept my face still. Years in corporate America teach you one thing very well. Never show emotion in the room. I swallowed. With respect, I said, the delay isn't on my end. Legal changed the terms last week. And Richard raised his hand. Excuses, he said. Everyone else manages to perform. Then he looked around the table and smiled. Let's be honest, he said. Some people are just placeholders. A couple of people laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was safer. I nodded slowly. Understood? I said. Richard moved on like nothing had happened. Slides, numbers, action items. But something inside me had shifted. Because this wasn't the first time that IT was just the first time he said it out loud. For 3 years, I'd been the quiet one, the guy who stayed late. The guy who fixed problems before they exploded. The guy who didn't take credit because he thought results spoke for themselves. I believed that if I worked hard enough, someone would notice. Instead, Richard noticed my silence and mistook it for weakness. After the meeting ended, people avoided my eyes. A few gave me sympathetic looks. One patted my shoulder and whispered, "Don't take it personally." I smiled. That fake corporate smile that says I'm fine when you're not. Back at my desk, my email inbox was already filling up. Subject lines about the deal. Questions, concerns, urgency. Richard wanted answers. The same deal, he said, proved I was useless. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I opened a folder I hadn't touched in weeks. A private one. Inside were notes. Contact. Alternate proposals. A parallel strategy I'd been building quietly, just in case. Not because I planned to betray the company, but because I'd learned something early in my career. Never rely on someone who doesn't respect you to protect your future. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled slowly. If Richard wanted to believe I was useless, fine, I would let him. For now. Because what he didn't know, what no one in that room knew, was that the deal wasn't stalled. IT was waiting. Waiting for the right person to close it. And for the first time, I stopped wondering whether I belonged at that table. I already knew the answer. Chapter 2. What I built in silence that afternoon. The office felt different. Same desks. Same keyboards clicking. Same low hum of air conditioning. But now there was something else underneath it all. Distance. People talked to me, but not with me. They sent emails instead of stopping by my desk. Conversations ended when I approached. Not out of cruelty, out of fear. Because when a boss calls someone useless in public, the message isn't just for that person, it's a warning that I worked quietly, answering emails with short, professional replies. No emotion. No defensiveness. I gave Richard exactly what he expected. Compliance. What he didn't see was what I was doing after hours. For months, I'd been studying that client, the logistics company, far beyond what my role technically required. I knew their expansion goals, their internal politics, their cash flow issues, and, more importantly, their pain points. They didn't want just a vendor. They wanted leverage. Our company had approached them like every other competitor. Generic pitch decks, surface-level promises, inflated timelines. I had approached them differently. Late nights. Careful listening. Quiet follow-ups that weren't tracked in the CRM. And one contact in particular changed everything. His name was Daniel Carter, mid-40s, VP of Operations. Recently promoted. Pressured to deliver results fast or risk being replaced. We'd spoken several times. Off the record, NO meetings, NO calendars. Just phone calls that started with business and ended with honesty. A few weeks earlier, he'd said something that stuck with me. Everyone keeps selling me solutions, Daniel had said. No one asks me what happens if I fail. That's when I realized the deal wasn't stalled, IT was misread. Back at my apartment that night, I opened my laptop at the kitchen counter. No suit, no tie. Just a t-shirt and cold takeout. I pulled up my private folder. Inside was a revised proposal, one Richard had never seen. Different structure, different pricing model, different risk distribution. If accepted, it would lock the client in for 5 years and quietly position me as the architect behind the expansion strategy. But there was a problem. Company policy. Any client-facing proposal had to go through Richard. And Richard had made it clear how he saw me. So I did what corporate life teaches you to do when you're cornered. I waited. Not passively, strategically. Over the next few days, the pressure increased. Richard sent emails with more people CC'd. Questions got sharper. Deadlines got shorter. Public accountability without authority. Classic. Then came the message I expected. Subject. Client call. Urgent. Richard wanted me on the call with Daniel. Not because he trusted me, because he needed answers. The call started tense. Richard did most of the talking. Over-explaining. Over-promising. Daniel listened politely, but I could hear it in his voice. Hesitation. At one point, Richard said, "Mark's been handling the details." Daniel paused. "Oh," he said. "Mark, I didn't know you were still involved." Still involved. I felt Richard glance at me through the screen. I spoke carefully. "I've been tracking your concerns," I said, "especially around implementation risk." Daniel's tone changed instantly. "Yes," he said. "That's exactly it." I could feel Richard stiffen. Before he could interrupt, Daniel continued, "I actually wanted to talk to you separately about that." There it was. The opening. After the call, Richard messaged me privately. "Send me everything you've worked on." He wrote, "No please, no acknowledgement. Just expectation." I replied, "Happy to walk you through it tomorrow." He didn't respond. That night, I stared at my laptop again. I knew what was happening. Richard planned to take my work, reshape it just enough, and present it as his own. If it worked, he'd take the credit. If it failed, I'd remain the problem. That's how he operated. I thought back to the meeting. To the word useless. Then I made a decision. I emailed Daniel directly. Not the proposal, just a short message. "Daniel, I have an alternative structure that directly addresses the risk you mentioned. No sales pitch, just clarity. Let me know if you want to see it." I didn't copy Richard. I didn't hide it either. I simply stopped asking for permission. Daniel replied 10 minutes later. "Send it." I sat back. This was the moment. If this blew up, I'd be done. If it worked, everything would change. I attached the proposal. Then I waited. The next morning, my phone buzzed before I even reached the office. "Daniel?" "Mark?" he said, skipping pleasantries. "Why hasn't anyone else shown me this?" I didn't answer right away. "I don't know," I said honestly. There was silence on the line. "This," he said slowly, is what we've been asking for. By the time I got to my desk, my inbox was exploding. Meeting requests. Follow-ups. A calendar invite marked high priority. From Richard. But this time, the power had shifted. Because now, the deal wasn't his anymore. It was mine. And he didn't know it yet. Chapter 3. When control started slipping, Richard called the meeting for 8:30 a.m. early enough to assert dominance. Late enough to make a point. The invite included me, him, and 2 senior directors. No agenda. Just a title. Deal alignment. I walked into the conference room with my notebook in hand and my phone in my pocket. Calm. Neutral. Professional. Richard was already there, standing by the window, arms crossed. He didn't look at me when I sat down. The directors arrived a minute later, exchanging small talk, unaware they'd walked into a shifting power dynamic. Richard cleared his throat. "Let's get started," he said. He launched into a summary of the deal, his version of it. Conservative. Safe. The same structure we'd been pitching for months. As he spoke, I noticed something important. He never mentioned risk mitigation. Not once. Because he didn't fully understand it. When he finished, one of the directors leaned forward. "Daniel seemed hesitant on the call," she said. "Did we address his concerns?" Richard hesitated for half a second too long. "We're working through them," he said. "Mark has been assisting. That I kept my expression neutral." The other director turned to me. "Mark," he said. "What's your red?" Richard shot me a warning look. It was subtle. But I saw it. I chose my words carefully. "I believe the client is ready," I said. "But only if we restructure how we absorb the initial risk." Richard's jaw tightened. "That's not aligned with our margins," he interrupted. "It is," I said calmly. "If we offset it in year 2. Silence. The directors looked between us. Richard forced a smile. "We can discuss details later," he said. "Let's stay high level." The meeting ended quickly after that. Too quickly. As soon as the directors left, Richard turned to me. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he snapped. I didn't raise my voice. "I'm answering questions," I said. "You went behind my back," he said. "You sent material to the client without approval." I met his eyes. "I sent clarity," I said. "They asked for it." His face reddened. "You don't get to decide that," he said. "You work for me." That word again. Useless. Placeholder. I nodded slowly. "Understood," I said. "Then I suggest we align, because Daniel is expecting a follow-up today." Richard froze. "Expecting it from who?" he asked. I paused just long enough. "From me." For the first time, I saw something new in his expression. Not anger. Feared. He turned away, pacing. "This isn't how things work," he muttered. "You don't just take ownership." "I didn't take it," I said. "I built it." He spun back around. "You think this makes you important?" he said. "You're replaceable." I didn't respond, because I didn't need to anymore. An hour later, my phone buzzed. Daniel again. "We reviewed your structure," he said. "Legal likes it. Finance likes it. We want to move forward." My pulse stayed steady. "Great," I said. "I'll coordinate next steps." "One more thing," he added. "We want you leading implementation." I closed my eyes briefly. "Happy to," I said. When I hung up, I forwarded the email confirmation to Richard. No commentary, no emotion. Just facts. 5 minutes later, he stormed out of his office. "Why wasn't I on this?" he demanded. "They asked for continuity," I said. "They trust the person who understands the details." He stared at me, searching for leverage. But leverage only works when you have it. That afternoon, the rumor mill exploded. People whispered. People watched. The same coworkers who'd avoided my desk now stopped by with questions. "What's going on with the deal? Are you leading it now?" "Congrats, man." I smiled politely, but inside, something hardened. Because this wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. Richard called me useless because he couldn't control what he didn't understand. And now, control was slipping through his fingers. At 6:12 p.m., I got one final email. Subject: Client confirmation, the deal was officially approved. Multi-year 0.7 figures. That I leaned back in my chair as the office emptied around me. 0.3 days earlier, I'd been humiliated in that same building. Now, the thing he said, proved I didn't belong, was the reason everything changed. And I knew deep down that this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of the reckoning. Chapter 4. When the truth became public, the company-wide meeting was scheduled for Friday afternoon. Quarterly update. Mandatory attendance. All departments. These meetings were usually predictable, numbers on slides, polite applause, vague optimism. But this time, the atmosphere felt charged before anyone even spoke. Word travels fast in an office. By the time I walked into the auditorium, people were already looking at me differently. Not openly, not obviously, but differently. Richard stood near the front, talking to the VP of sales. He laughed a little too loudly, adjusting his tie, trying to look in control. I took a seat halfway back. Neutral ground. The CEO stepped onto the stage and began the presentation. Growth charts, revenue streams, strategic wins. Then he paused. I want to take a moment, he said, to highlight a deal that will significantly impact our next 5 years. My stomach tightened. The logistics expansion. The slide appeared on the screen. Contract value. Timeline. Client logo. The CEO smiled. This wasn't an easy win, he continued. It required rethinking our risk model and deeply understanding the client's operational reality. He looked down at his notes. I want to recognize Mark for leading this effort. For half a second, there was silence. Then applause. Not thunderous, but real. I felt heat rise to my face as people turned to look at me. Some surprised, some impressed, some embarrassed. I stood briefly, nodded, and sat back down. I didn't look at Richard. I didn't need to. The CEO continued. Mark worked directly with the client to structure a solution that others had missed. This is the kind of leadership we want to encourage. Leadership. The word hung in the air. After the meeting, people surrounded me. Handshakes. Congratulations. Questions. Richard approached last. He forced a smile. Nice work, he said. No apology, no acknowledgement. Just survival. Later that day, HR emailed me. Subject. Role discussion. The meeting was short. They offered me a new title. Expanded authority. Direct client ownership. And, most importantly, reporting outside Richard's chain. I accepted. Not out of spite. Out of clarity. That evening, as I packed up my desk, Richard walked past without stopping. The power dynamic had reversed, quietly and permanently. I thought back to the word he'd used. Useless. Funny how fast that label disappears when results speak. I left the building that night with something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not triumph. Peace. Because I didn't need him to see my value anymore. The truth already had. Chapter 5. The word that lost its power. A few weeks after the deal closed, the noise faded. That's how corporate victories work. One moment, you're the headline. The next, you're background again, unless you understand what really changed. My new role came with a different office. Not bigger, just quieter. Fewer interruptions. More autonomy. I worked directly with clients now, not through layers of approval designed to dilute accountability. Richard and I crossed paths occasionally. I in hallways. I in elevators. I in meetings where he no longer spoke for me. He never said the word again. Not to me. Not to anyone, as far as I could tell. But I knew he remembered. Because once a power imbalance flips, both sides feel it. One afternoon, I ran into Daniel in person for the first time. We shook hands in a conference room far from the one where I'd been humiliated weeks earlier. You know, he said, smiling, I almost didn't take that call with you. I raised an eyebrow. Why not? Your boss didn't seem convinced you mattered, he said. But you listened. That's what closed this. That stayed with me. Later that night, driving home, I replayed the moment Richard had said it. You're useless. For a long time, I'd thought that sentence had power because of who said it. But the truth was simpler. It only had power because I believed it might be true. That's the quiet danger of working under someone who benefits from your doubt. They don't need to destroy you, they just need you to question yourself long enough to stay small. I didn't get revenge, I didn't embarrass him publicly. I didn't need to. Because the most effective response to humiliation isn't retaliation. It's clarity. I learned something that year that no promotion could teach me. Silence isn't weakness. Patience isn't submission. And competence doesn't need permission to exist. The next time I sat in a meeting room like that one, the glass walls, the long table, the stale coffee, I watched someone else get interrupted, dismissed, labeled. I spoke up. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough. Because I knew exactly what that moment felt like. And I knew something else too. People who rush to call others useless are usually terrified of being exposed as unnecessary themselves. As for me, I stopped waiting to be validated by people who couldn't see past their own reflection. And that word, the one he thought would define me, it didn't follow me. It stayed with him.